We're going to talk here about Sketcher. In particular, we're going to talk about what kind of things can we put in a sketch that are legal for making sketch-based features like pads and pockets and things like that. What kind of geometry can go in the sketch? And then also, even if some geometry is legally allowed to go in the sketch, we do have some best practices of things that we maybe don't really recommend. Okay. Let's talk about some terms here. A closed profile, here we have 3 closed profiles. These closed profiles hold water. Open profiles do not hold water. Okay? And then we have the concept of intersecting. Is just touching intersecting, or do they actually have to cross? We'll take a look at what Catia views as the terminology there. And also for open profiles, is just lines touching considered intersecting, or do they actually have to cross? We'll take a look at that. And then inside of Catia, once you've created a sketch and are trying to create a sketch-based feature, like in this case, a pad, this is the pad dialog box, there's a thick option, and we can see that we'll see how that affects what's legal and what's not legal in a sketch. Okay? Let's go into Catia and take a look at a few of these first concepts. Let's go to Sketcher, let's pick a sketch plane, and I'm going to dock these up here out of the way. There we go. And I'm going to make a little rectangle. We'll get out of Sketcher. We'll make a pad. We'll pay limit 1 and limit 2. Now you'll see the orange arrow. The orange arrow, if you flip it, limit 1 and limit 2 go the other way. We'll say OK, and I'm going to unhide the sketch. Okay. Now I'm going to make another sketch, some geometry inside of that sketch. So it's the same sketch. I'm still in sketch point 1, and let's just draw, say, a circle. There you go. Let's come out of Sketcher and hit Update. So we can see that 2 closed profiles are allowed in a sketch. Let's go to inside that sketch and let's pull these over until they just touch. In fact, I'm going to actually make a constraint that says tangent. Okay, there you go. Now they're just touching. We'll get out of Sketcher. We'll hit Update. Well, now that's legal. Control Z a couple of times to back out of it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try to make them cross each other. So I'll double click the sketch to go back into it, and now we're going to go like this. And we'll get out of Sketcher, and we'll say Update, and you know what? It doesn't like that. It's saying that that's not a legal sketch. You can't have 2 closed profiles intersecting, and intersecting is considered crossing. Okay? Close. So now let's go to create a new part, and let's play with open profiles. Let's go to Sketcher. And now for an open profile, I'm just going to create some quick geometry here, maybe here, here, and double click. Let's get out of Sketcher. Now let's make a pad out of that. It's warning me now right away it doesn't like this profile. It told me that I need to modify some of my options in order to go on. And what I'm going to do is turn on this thick option. And notice this thin pad options over here. These are dimmed out now. But if I hit thick, those become highlighted. And I'll just increase thickness 1 a little bit. And I'll say OK. Now I'm going to unhide my sketch. And let's actually drag these out a little bit, limit 1 and limit 2. There we go, and say OK. Okay. So you can see that it actually made the thickness towards the bottom here in this case, towards the inside, I guess if we call it. How come it didn't go the other way? Well, if I double click it again to get back into the dialog box, you can see that it has a thickness 2. And I can make it go in the thickness 2 direction a little bit also. Okay? And in fact, there's a couple of orange arrows here. Now this orange arrow, if I flip it, makes it go to the other side. So it affects limit 1 and limit 2. The direction of this is selecting the positive direction for limit 1. Okay. Now, you would think that this orange arrow here would be the direction of the thickness 1. But it turns out that this is not working currently, but I believe it should be the direction of limit 1. Okay, we'll just say OK. Before we say finish this this section on thickness, I want to point out something to you. Is what if I wanted it to go 6 millimeters in both directions? Well, I could simply type in 6 in both directions, and that's what I would get. Well, let's type in 6 in 2. Okay. And let's hit this neutral fiber and watch what happens to thickness 2. When I hit that, the thickness 2 goes away. What it's saying is it's going to be the same on both sides. So now it's 6 millimeters both ways. Or is it 6 millimeters total? So let's do a OK, and let's measure this. So now we'll come to our measuring icon, and we'll measure this, and we find out that it's 6 millimeters total now. Okay, so it actually split it. It's 3 and 3. Okay. Now let's come back over here. So now we've seen a little bit about what the thick option does. Let's talk about thick with intersecting profiles. Let's go back to Catia, and let's go into this sketch. And let's draw another sketch over here, say an ellipse. Okay. And now with this ellipse, if we get out of Sketcher, oh, and I want to draw one more line. I'm going to draw a line here. Okay, let's get out of Sketcher. And let's say OK and update. There we go. So now we have, wow, we have a closed profile and 2 open profiles all in the same sketch, and they all seem to be working well with the thick option. Let me double click the thick option, and let's turn off the neutral fiber, and let's put thickness 2 to be 0 and say OK. Now, what's interesting here is you see that the thickness for this open profile on the left went kind of down. The thickness for this closed profile went towards the inside, and the thickness for this line element went to the right. What if I wanted the thickness on the line element to go to the left instead of to the right? Well, you'd have to put it in a separate sketch. It can't be in this sketch because Sketcher here is kind of picking out what it wants to, I mean, it's doing what it wants to do with this sketch. If you actually have a specific direction you want for this element that's different than the other two, you have to put it in a different sketch. Now let's go into that sketch again, and let's do a little bit of intersecting here. Let's pull this thing over so that it intersects, and let's pull this over so that it just touches. And let's see what this does. And let's get out of Sketcher and hit update. And wow, that really is pretty wild looking. But we see that intersecting and touching and all of that is allowed in with open profiles. So we discussed the thick option and some of the ideas that we can do with that. We saw that touching is okay for closed profiles, but intersecting is not. We saw that the thick option for open profiles and closed profiles is perfectly fine. And here's an interesting part that was made with a sketch that has both closed and open profiles in it. And these ribs down the center were made with the pad option and with that particular sketch. Now let's talk about a best practice, sometimes called company standards, or in this case we're going to call them our classroom standards. Something that is legal to do in Catia, but maybe not recommended. And in particular, we're going to be talking about pockets versus holes. There's a pocket icon. It's a sketch-based feature, and there's a hole icon. It's a sketch-based feature. Now, here in this part below, we see a green hole and a yellow hole, but really the green hole is not a hole. It's a circular pocket, and we're going to talk about whether which which icon is used or should be used for making this kind of a feature. And however, since this is a uh, company or classroom standard, we're going to put this off to the next section. We're going to cover this holes versus pockets in the classroom standard section. So look for the video at that point.